Late 2025, somewhere over the mountains. A military helicopter is in the air. On board, a senior intelligence officer, currently serving, trained, experienced. Not the kind of man who is easily impressed. And then he sees them. In his own words, written down in an official government document, he describes countless orange orbs swarming in all directions against the backdrop of the mountain. The encounter lasts over an hour. When it is over, he and his crew are left, in their own report, virtually speechless. Here's the part that should make you sit up. That account is not from a tabloid. It is not from a late-night radio show. It is not a story passed around the internet. It came from the United States government, released by the Pentagon, declassified, posted on an official military website for anyone on Earth to read. And it is one file out of more than 160. In May of 2026, after 80 years of denial, the most secretive government on the planet opened the vault. This is what was inside. May 8th, 2026. A new website quietly goes live. The address is simple: war.gov/UFO. The United States Department of War, working with NASA, the FBI, the State Department, and the nation's intelligence agencies, has just done something it has refused to do for 3 generations. It has released its files on UFOs. The official statement is blunt, quote, "The American people can now access the federal government's declassified UAP files instantly. The latest videos, photos, and original source documents from across the entire United States government are all in one place. No clearance required." No clearance required. Think about what that sentence means. For 80 years, this material was locked away, behind security classifications, behind redactions, behind the flat denial that any of it even existed. And now, with a single mouse click, it belongs to the public. The reaction is instant. Within weeks, the website logs over 1 billion visits. Let that number land. 1 billion. The servers strain. The pages glitch under the weight of the world trying to look inside at the same time. This was set in motion months earlier. In February of 2026, the President of the United States signed a directive. In his own words, it was, quote, "My honor to direct my administration to identify and provide government files related to alien and extraterrestrial life, unidentified aerial phenomena, and unidentified flying objects." The stated goal from the Secretary of War himself was 2 words: maximum transparency. They gave the program a name: Pursue, the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters. And they were clear about one thing from the very beginning. This was not a one-time release. This was just the first crack in the door. More files, they promised, would come, on a rolling basis, pulled from what they described as, quote, tens of millions of records, many existing only on paper, spanning many decades. Tens of millions of records. The first release alone held more than 160 files. Videos, photographs, memos, witness testimony, diplomatic cables, astronaut transcripts, material dating all the way back to 1944. But to understand why this moment matters so much, why a government website about flying objects could pull 1 billion visitors in a matter of weeks, you have to understand what came before it. You have to understand 80 years of saying no. The story does not begin in 2026. It begins in the summer of 1947, in the desert near a small town in New Mexico. A town whose name would become the most famous single word in the entire history of this subject. Roswell. Something fell out of the sky onto a ranch. The military was called, and for a few short hours, the official position of the United States Army Air Forces was that they had recovered a flying disc. We know this because the document still exists, and it is in these files. An FBI memo from the Bureau's Dallas field office sent to headquarters. It records that a major in the Air Force called to report, quote, that an object purporting to be a flying disc was recovered near Roswell, New Mexico. The memo describes it: hexagonal in shape, suspended from a balloon by cable. And then, almost immediately, the story changed. It was a weather balloon, they said. A mistake, nothing to see. And the door, which had cracked open for a single afternoon, slammed shut. That became the pattern for the next 80 years. A sighting, a report, a wave of public fear, and then an official explanation that asked you to stop asking questions. But behind closed doors, the government never actually stopped looking. In 1948, the same era, the military's own Armed Forces Special Weapons Program compiled a report, 116 pages long, covering the years 1948 to 1950. Inside it, 209 sightings of unexplained objects, many of them clustered around one place: Sandia, New Mexico, a center of America's nuclear weapons research. Witnesses there described objects that, quote, maneuvered, departed, vanished, and then apparently exploded. Remember that detail, the objects near the nuclear site. We will come back to it, because it is not a coincidence, and it is one of the most disturbing threads running through all 80 years of these files. Through the 1950s and 60s, the sightings kept coming. The files released now show them clustered in the Cold War's most dangerous corners: Germany, the Soviet Union, places where the two most powerful militaries on Earth stood eye to eye, and where something else appeared to be watching them both. The government's answer to all of it, for decades, was a program called Project Blue Book. Officially, its job was to investigate. In practice, many came to believe its real job was to explain things away, to close cases, to reassure the public, to make the strange sound ordinary. And for a long time, it worked. The subject became a joke: little green men, tinfoil hats, something you were not allowed to take seriously if you wanted to be taken seriously yourself.
But the reports never stopped. The pilots kept seeing things. The radar kept catching things. And slowly, over the last decade, the wall of denial began to crack. In 2020, the Pentagon did something almost unthinkable. It officially confirmed 3 leaked Navy videos were real. Then came the congressional hearings, the whistleblowers, senior officials testifying under oath that some of these encounters simply could not be explained. It had taken 80 years, but the government was finally, slowly, admitting the one thing it had spent those 80 years denying: that it did not know what these things were. And in May of 2026, that admission became a flood. Of everything the government released, the videos are what stopped people cold. Not documents, not testimony. Footage. Recorded by military sensors, by trained operators, on equipment built to track the fastest aircraft on Earth. Across the first 2 releases, dozens of videos. Infrared, grainy, black and white. The kind of footage that is almost more unsettling because of how ordinary it looks.
Start with Greece, 2023. A single object caught on camera. It is moving at roughly 80 miles an hour, and then it does something. It makes a turn, a 90-degree turn, a perfect right angle at speed. Think about what that requires. Anything moving at 80 miles an hour has momentum. A jet that tried to turn 90 degrees instantly would tear itself apart. The pilot inside would be crushed. The laws of physics, as we understand them, do not allow it. And yet, there it is on the recording. Then there is Syria, a separate file. An object that demonstrates, in the government's own words, instant acceleration. Not gradual, not building up speed. Instant, from still to gone. Near Japan, the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command logged something else. An object shaped, they said, like a football, moving through the sky with no visible wings, no visible engine, no exhaust, no way that anyone could identify that it should be flying at all. And over the Great Lakes, in the skies above Lake Huron, in 2023, an object was tracked, and this time, the United States did not just watch. A military jet was scrambled, a missile was fired, and the object, whatever it was shot out of the sky. To this day, the government has never publicly confirmed what it destroyed. Now, a fair question. Couldn't these just be drones, balloons, a trick of the camera, a smudge on a lens, a reflection of heat? Sometimes, yes, and we will get to that, honestly, because that part matters too. But the people analyzing this footage are not amateurs. They are military analysts, intelligence officers, the exact people whose entire job is to identify what shows up on a screen. And on these objects, the verdict was the same word, over and over and over. Unidentified.
Here is where the story takes a turn that most people never hear about. Because when we imagine UFOs, we look up at the sky. But some of the most baffling files in this release point somewhere else. Down at the water. In the second release, a video from 2022, a U.S. Navy submarine, and around it, objects, spherical, round, and they are moving in and out of the water. Let that sink in, going into the ocean, coming back out, as if the surface of the sea, the barrier that stops every aircraft humanity has ever built, simply did not exist for them. There's a word for this, transmedium, an object that moves between mediums, air to water, to air again, without slowing, without damage, without effort. To understand why this matters, think about what happens when you dive into a pool, the slap of the surface. Water is roughly 800 times denser than air. Hitting it at speed is like hitting concrete. Our fastest torpedoes crawl compared to a jet. And yet these objects passed through that wall like it was nothing. And it was not just near the submarine. Another file, a formation of 4 objects over the water near Iran. Not 1, 4, moving together, in formation. The way you move when something is flying you, with purpose. Now, could the spheres be a sensor glitch? Could the formation be drones launched from a ship? These are real possibilities, and serious people have raised them. But here's the problem. No known drone from any nation on Earth can fly through the air, dive into the ocean, and fly back out. Not American, not Russian, not Chinese. That technology, as far as the public record shows, does not exist. And if it does exist,
then someone has built something the rest of the world cannot. Which brings us to the most disturbing pattern in all of these files.
Go back to something I asked you to remember. The objects over Sandia, 1948, the nuclear research site in New Mexico. At the time, it could have been a fluke, a one-time coincidence. It was not. Because when you lay out 8 decades of these files side by side, a pattern emerges that is almost impossible to ignore. The objects, again and again and again, show up in the same kind of place. Over our weapons, our most powerful weapons, our nuclear weapons. The files released under Pursue include documents from the Department of Energy, the agency that guards America's nuclear arsenal. And among the sites that appear, Pantex. You may never have heard that name. Most people have not. Pantex, in Texas, is the facility where the United States assembles and disassembles its nuclear weapons. It is one of the most secure, most sensitive, most heavily guarded places in the entire country. And something has been showing up there. This is the thread that connects everything. The sightings near Sandia in the 40s, the encounters near Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, the place where the Roswell debris was allegedly taken, the objects near naval fleets, near missile tests, near the machinery of war. Whatever these things are, they are not wandering randomly. They appear with eerie consistency exactly where the most dangerous technology humanity has ever created is kept. And this is the detail that takes the subject out of science fiction and turns it into a genuine national security question. Because here is what military officials actually fear. Forget aliens for a moment. Set that aside entirely. What if a foreign power, an enemy, has developed surveillance technology so advanced that it can hover over our nuclear weapons facilities at will, and we cannot catch it, cannot identify it, cannot stop it? That possibility, to the people whose job is to protect this country, may be even more frightening than the alternative. Because an alien we cannot do anything about. But an enemy who can do this and is watching changes the balance of power on Earth. So far, everything we've talked about has happened in the sky or on the water, here on Earth. But some of the files in this release come from much, much farther away. When the Pentagon opened the vault, it did not just release military footage. It released files from NASA, including documents connected to the most famous mission in human history, Apollo 11, the first time human beings walked on the moon. One of the documents in the release attributes 3 separate observations to the lunar module pilot, Buzz Aldrin, one of only 2 men to set foot on the moon that day. The first, an object seen on the way out to the moon. The second, flashes of light inside the cabin. And the third, a bright light that the crew, quote, tentatively assumed to be a laser. Now, I want to be careful and honest here because this is exactly the kind of detail that gets twisted. Astronauts see strange things in space for ordinary reasons. Ice particles drifting off the spacecraft, catching the sun, look like glowing objects. Light bouncing inside a cabin has mundane explanations. Aldrin himself, in the years since, has said he believes what he saw was most likely panels separating from the rocket. So why does it matter? It matters because of where the document came from. Not a rumor, not a conspiracy forum. An official NASA file that the United States government chose to declassify and place in this collection. And it was not alone. The release included 7 separate audio recordings from NASA missions,
recordings of what was said in the moment by the people who were actually there, hundreds of thousands of miles from the rest of humanity. The government has not told us what is on all of them. It has simply handed them over and said, in effect, you listen, you decide.
If there is one thing these files make impossible to believe anymore, it is the idea that this is an American story. Because buried in the release is a set of documents from the United States State Department, diplomatic cables, messages sent back to Washington from American embassies all over the world, spanning 40 years, from 1985 to 2025. And the locations read like a map of the entire planet. Papua New Guinea, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Georgia, Mexico. Different continents, different governments, different cultures. People who had never met, who shared no language, who had nothing in common, reporting the same impossible things in the same frightened words. One account stands out. 1994, a commercial airline pilot flying at 41,000 feet, a professional responsible for hundreds of lives, trained to identify everything in the sky around him. And he reported something he could not explain. This is the pattern that should give even the skeptics pause. It is easy to dismiss one person, one grainy video, one frightened witness. But it is much harder to dismiss decades of reports from pilots, from sailors, from soldiers, from astronauts, from diplomats, across dozens of countries, all describing the same handful of impossible behaviors. And the world has noticed. This is no longer happening in the shadows. In France, the National Assembly, the heart of the French government, scheduled a formal conference on UAP for June of 2026, backed by the country's National Space Agency. In Japan, a senior government official confirmed on the record that the government is, quote, constantly gathering and analyzing information on these incidents in close coordination with the United States. Read that again. Governments, plural, are now openly admitting they take this seriously, that they are watching the skies together. The joke, the little green men, the tinfoil hats, is over. Somewhere in the last few years, quietly, this stopped being a punchline and became a question that the most powerful nations on Earth are now asking out loud. Now we come to the most important part of this entire story, and it is the part that the tabloids will never tell you. Because for everything we have just walked through, the orbs, the spheres, the 90-degree turns, there is one phrase the United States government has repeated at every single step, and we have to be honest about it. Unidentified does not mean alien. The Pentagon has said this plainly. Defense officials have said it. The files themselves say it. These are, quote, unresolved cases, meaning the government is unable to make a definitive determination about what was seen. Unresolved is not the same as extraterrestrial. And when you look closely, many of these sightings do have possible earthly explanations. Weather balloons, surveillance drones, camera artifacts, the shimmer of heat, ice crystals at altitude, even reflections of distant city lights on a cockpit canopy. Take Roswell itself. For decades, the holy grail of believers. But a fragment long claimed to be debris from that crash was eventually analyzed. And the verdict? Magnesium, an alloy made on Earth, nothing more. And this is where you have to be careful, because the moment these files came out, the internet flooded with lies, fake stories, invented claims of recovered alien bodies, photographs that turned out to be computer-generated.
Material that had been floating around paranormal books for decades, repackaged as breaking news. None of that is in the official files. The government has confirmed no recovered craft, no bodies, no proof of extraterrestrial life. Anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. But, and this is the part that keeps you awake, explaining away some of the cases does not explain away all of them. A weather balloon does not make a 90-degree turn at 80 miles an hour. A camera glitch does not dive into the ocean then fly back out. A reflection does not appear over and over above our nuclear weapons. So if it is not aliens, and the government swears it has no proof that it is, then we are left with a question that is almost more unsettling. What is it? The most sober minds in national security keep returning to one answer. Not little green men. Foreign surveillance. The possibility that a rival nation has developed technology a generation ahead of our own and has been testing it over our most secret installations while we watch, helpless to identify it. Aliens would be the discovery of the millennium. But an enemy we cannot see, cannot catch, and cannot match would be a threat happening right now. So where does this leave us? The files are still coming. The first release, May 8th. The second, 2 weeks later. A third expected in June. And after that, the government says, more, on a rolling basis, for as long as it takes to work through tens of millions of records. Most of them still sitting in storage. Many, in the government's own words, existing only on paper. Decades of reports, photographs, recordings that no member of the public has ever seen. And, in a remarkable move, the Pentagon has done something almost unheard of for a secretive institution. It has invited the public in. It has openly welcomed, quote, private sector analysis, asking scientists, researchers, ordinary people to help examine the evidence and try to resolve what the government could not. Which leaves one final question. The question underneath all of this. Why now? Why, after 80 years of denial, of cover stories, of weather balloons and closed cases, did the most secretive government on Earth suddenly decide to open the vault? Maybe it is genuine transparency. A new era of honesty with the public. Maybe it is pressure from a Congress and a public that simply refused to stop asking. Or maybe the government is releasing what it knows because something is changing, because the sightings are increasing, because whatever is out there is no longer content to stay hidden. We finally have the files. 80 years of secrets handed to us. No clearance required. And the strangest part of all is that after reading every page, watching every video, hearing every recording, we know more than we ever have. And we understand less than we hoped. The vault is open. The files are real. And the questions inside them are only beginning. I'm going to keep following this story as the next files are released. If you want to follow it with me, you know what to do.